things that you shouldn't do, some best practices. So I'd like to take people through a couple of sites. I tend to go for well-known sites or fun sites. You guys have all seen enough academic sites. I'm not sure there's a lot of fun in taking you through yet another college site. So, so I'm going to go to Target. Target is such a beautiful example of clear calls to action. When I actually land on the site now I'm in a state that's not when I landed on the site initially. I've actually gone into the kids menu and chosen an item. But when I choose the item in which I'm interested, you see some things are extremely obvious, not the least of which is the Add to Cart button, which is how they make money, is large. It's boldly colored. It looks different from the others. It uses different design conventions. For example, the font is larger than some of these other less important calls to action. Nonetheless, all the calls to action are bundled together so that your eye is drawn to that area. Target has done an excellent job of this in general. There's no question about what they want you to do at any given moment in time on the site. And the conventions for these buttons and these calls to action are consistent throughout the site. So no matter where you are in the site, it's always quite clear what they want you to do. And if you've seen it once, then you're already familiar with the convention, so there's no learning curve. There's no having to figure out where to go. Which is why, as I was mentioning before, that company where I actually couldn't find an item, I actually abandoned the site. For those of you who use Google Analytics, you'll know that if a call to action is not clear or prominent, as on this Target site, you will see abandonment rates. So, for example, people will go to a particular page on your site, and whereas normally you are expecting them to do something on that page, register for an event, perhaps, or sign up for a newsletter, and they don't, you should be seeing that in your Google Analytics and take a hint that that may very well be because they don't see it, it's not clearly labeled, or it doesn't follow a convention from page to page in your site. So another great example, I think, of calls to action, and again, there are all different kinds of calls to action. So here's a different version of a call to action. In this case, Sprint is looking to have the audience self-identify right from the beginning. This for institutions of higher education that offer various programs, or, for example, that are segmented by undergraduate and graduate. This is the kind of call to action that isn't, making a sale, if you will. But it's an important call to action in that it helps the audience self-identify and thereby putting them in the right area of the site to get the right information that's pertinent to them, and then hopefully to take a more direct call to action like signing up for an event again, or registering or applying to a school. So this is a different example, not what some people would traditionally think of as a call to action, but in actuality it is. Another example is The Onion. I love this. For those of you who have not ever seen it, it's excellent. It's kind of a comedy site. It spoofs on various topics of the day, whether it be politics or entertainment or what have you. But The Onion has really been pushing for the iPhone audience, figuring that the demographic for the iPhone fits the demographic for their site. And so what you can see here on the right, again, a very different design convention from the rest of the site and the rest of the content, is this download the iPhone app. It's also what some people might say is honkingly large. It is very large. It's pretty prominent. And the call to action itself, the download, is fairly obviously placed. This is an issue in some instances for instances of higher education, institutions of higher ed, and also for designers where this kind of large button seems too commercial or seems ungraceful, but in actuality, if you want people to take a particular action, you obviously don't want it to be grotesquely large, but large buttons provide good usability and they steer people in the right direction. So when they're appropriate, definitely use large-scale buttons placed prominently and with a clear design convention. Again, I think as another example of a different kind of call to action, so in this case, Barney's, because again, I'm an online shopper. In this case, Barney's actually uses the graphical elements or the photos of the product they're looking to sell. Now, this isn't necessarily directly relevant to higher education, but what it does say, what it does speak to, I think, is the power of iconography and the power of the visual call to action. So, for example, I think it's fairly clear if you were to look at this call to action here that you are going to be looking at shoes. Now, I don't even have to read the label or know what I'm clicking because it's so intuitive. So for a higher education website, things like a good use of iconography, whether it be icons that depict individual departments at the university, whether it be icons, again, for the social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc., or whether it be icons for various actions, contact us being, a little telephone, email us being a little envelope or what have you. Visual calls to action are, I think, in some respects, the most powerful because the user doesn't actually have to read anything to grasp the concept of what they're expected to do. So you don't have to worry about messaging. It's fairly clear. So in terms of mapping your strategy, I suggest that you think about a couple of things. The first we mentioned earlier is the various channels through which you gain conversions. And by conversions, we just mean that somebody who visited your site, for example, and registered for an event, who eventually applies to the school, you would consider that a conversion. So you've converted somebody who attended an event. Knowing your conversion channels and the places from which you gain a sale, I suppose having a student register for the school is a sale in higher ed. Knowing those channels and the priority rank of the conversions is important so that when you are actually putting calls to action on a particular page, you know the priority order in which you need to put them based on the likelihood of a person that clicks on that button actually converting to whatever action it is you want to take. For example, again, prospective students. So I always recommend that the first thing you do is rank order the calls to action according to what is most likely to convert. And then there are some fairly simple rules to follow. Rule 1 is big buttons with less verbiage, iconography where possible, or short, clear phrases. So rather than be colloquial and say, if you would like to speak to somebody in admissions, rather than that, contact us or call us or email us. More action-oriented, more direct, and not specific to your organization, things that are universal conventions. The second thing is always make sure that there's lots of white space around a call to action. You want the call to action to stand out as opposed to the other content on the page. So always make sure that there's a good amount of white space around any call to action. The next thing is, as we talked before, make sure that the conventions are the same. So for example, in this case, there is a box around each of the calls to action. There's an icon on the left. There's a simple statement on the right. And as I mouse over each of them, they take on a glow state to indicate that that's the button I'm on. So they're very clear, and the design convention is the same, so I'm not confused about what I'm expected